In the center of Tokyo, there is a gate. Every day, thousands of people walk past it without stopping. Office workers, tourists, school children. It stands beside the imperial palace, quiet, weathered, unremarkable. And beneath their feet, a subway line runs through the city carrying the same name. Hanzomon, Hanzo's Gate. Most of the people who pass through it have no idea who Hanzo was. They don't know that 400 years ago, a man with that name changed the course of Japanese history. Not by winning a battle, but by walking his lord through the most dangerous mountains in the country, on the worst night of his life. The world remembers him as a ninja, a shadow, an assassin. The truth is stranger and better. June 1582. A man is on his knees in a temple in Kyoto, holding a short blade, preparing to die. His name is Tokugawa Ieyasu. In 18 years, he will rule all of Japan. Tonight, he has 34 men, no army, no allies, and a price on his head. He is not afraid of dying. He is afraid of dying badly. Hunted down in a ditch by farmers with bamboo spears, his head sold for coin. And then one of his retainers steps forward, a man in his 40s, broad-shouldered, scarred, a spearman. He says, "Let me take you through Iga." Everyone in that room knows what those words mean. Iga is a death sentence. To understand why this man said it and why Ieyasu trusted him, we have to go back 40 years. He was born in 1542 in the province of Mikawa in eastern Japan, not in Iga. That matters. The popular image of Hattori Hanzo, the hooded figure on the rooftop, the master of poisons and disappearing acts, comes from stories told long after he died. The real Nan was born into a samurai household and raised as a samurai. He wore armor. He carried a spear. He fought in open daylight, on open ground. But his family carried something else. His grandfather had come from Iga, a remote mountainous region south of Kyoto, made of steep valleys and hidden villages. Iga had no great lord. It governed itself through a council of local families. And it survived by selling the one thing it had in abundance: men who knew how to move unseen. Spies, scouts, infiltrators. The world would later call them ninja. At the time, they were simply called shinobi, those who endure. The Hattori name meant something in those valleys, and Hanzo, a samurai in Mikawa with blood in Iga, stood in two worlds at once. He was sent to a temple as a boy to be raised as a monk. He ran away. At 16, he fought his first battle, a night attack on Udo Castle. He led men over the walls in the dark. When it was over, the story that came back was not about tactics. It was about how he fought. They started calling him Oni no Hanzo, Hanzo the demon. He was 16 years old, and the young lord he fought for, barely older than he was, never forgot it. That lord was Tokugawa Ieyasu. Ieyasu had spent his childhood as a hostage, traded between rival clans as a guarantee of his family's obedience. He grew up patient, careful, and slow to trust. So when he finally came into his own power, the handful of men who had stood by him in the lean years became the core of everything he built. Hanzo was one of them. For the next 25 years, Japan tore itself apart, and Hanzo was in it. He fought at Anegawa. He fought at Mikatagahara in 1572, where Ieyasu was beaten so badly he fled the field and rode for his life. Hanzo was among the men who covered that retreat. By every account at the time, he was a superb battlefield commander, a spear specialist, the kind of man you put at the front when the line is about to break. And then, in 1579, He was given an order he could not carry out. Ieyasu's eldest son, Nobuyasu, was accused of conspiring against Oda Nobunaga, the most powerful warlord in Japan and Ieyasu's own ally. Nobunaga demanded the young man's death. Ieyasu, who could not afford to refuse, obeyed. Nobuyasu was ordered to take his own life. He was 20 years old. By custom, a second stood behind him with a sword to end it quickly once the blade went in. That role, kaishaku, was the last mercy you could give a man. Hanzo was chosen. He knelt behind the young lord he had watched grow up. He drew his sword, and he could not do it. He broke down. He wept. He said, and the words were written down, that he could not raise a blade against his master's son. Another man had to step in and finish it. When Ieyasu was told what had happened, he did not punish him. He said, "Even a demon sheds tears." This is the man who, 3 years later, would offer to walk his lord into the deadliest province in Japan.
Now we can go back to that temple in Kyoto. June 1582.
Ieyasu had been traveling near Sakai on a sightseeing trip of all things, with a small group of retainers and no army. And then the news arrived. Oda Nobunaga was dead. His own general, Akechi Mitsuhide, had turned on him and surrounded him at Honno-ji Temple in Kyoto. Nobunaga died in the fire. Japan's most powerful man was gone in a single night, and every alliance in the country collapsed at once. Ieyasu was Nobunaga's ally, which made him, as of that morning, a man worth killing. He was hundreds of kilometers from his own territory. The main roads were watched. The countryside was crawling with what were called fallen warrior hunts, villagers and bandits who stripped and killed fleeing samurai for their armor and for the bounty on their heads. There was exactly one route home that avoided the main roads, through Iga. And here is what makes what happened next remarkable. 1 year earlier, in 1581, Oda Nobunaga had invaded Iga with tens of thousands of troops and burned it to the ground. Villages, temples, families. The campaign was designed to break the region permanently, and it very nearly did. Thousands died. The survivors scattered into the hills. They hated Nobunaga. And Ieyasu was Nobunaga's ally. So sending Ieyasu into Iga in the summer of 1582 was, on paper, the worst idea imaginable. He would be walking, with 34 men, into a region full of survivors who had every reason on earth to take his head. Hanzo went in first. We don't know exactly what he said or to whom. What we know is that he was a Hattori, that the name still carried weight in those valleys, and that he had spent his entire life standing between the Tokugawa and the men of Iga. He called in everything he had, and the mountains answered. Guides appeared out of the forest, men who knew which paths were watched and which were empty, which villages would take money and which would take blood. For 3 days they moved Ieyasu east, through Iga and Koga, over passes, around ambushes. Some accounts say 200 local men escorted him, some say 300. There was fighting. Not all of it was written down. On the 4th day, Ieyasu reached the coast, took a ship, and landed in his own province. He was alive. For the rest of the Tokugawa era, his retainers would call it the greatest crisis of his life, worse than any battle he ever lost. And the man who carried him through it would spend the rest of his life guarding a gate. Ieyasu did not forget. He brought 200 eager men into his service and placed them under Hanzo's command, a standing unit of former shinobi, paid, housed, and permanently attached to the Tokugawa house. Hanzo led them for the rest of his life. He was not a spy master in a black hood. He was an officer with a difficult, dangerous, deeply unglamorous job, keeping 200 men from the mountains, loyal to the house of a lord they had once had every reason to kill. He died in 1596. He was 55 years old. 4 years later, Ieyasu won the Battle of Sekigahara. 3 years after that, he became shogun. His family would go on to rule Japan for the next 260 years, the longest era of peace in the country's history. Hanzo did not live to see any of it. When Ieyasu built his castle at Edo, the city we now call Tokyo, the western gate opened toward the quarter where Hanzo's Iga men were housed. They named it after him. There is one more detail, and it is the one that stays with me. After Hanzo died, command of the Iga unit passed to his son. It did not go well. Within a few years, the men refused to serve under him, and the unit was broken up and reassigned. They had never been loyal to the position. They had been loyal to him. His spear, or what remains of it, is still kept at Sainenji Temple in Tokyo, beside his grave. The gate is still there, and every day, hundreds of thousands of people ride the Hanzomon line beneath the city, without ever wondering whose name they are saying. The world remembers Hattori Hanzo as a ninja, a shadow on a rooftop, a sword in the dark. Japan remembers a spearman who wept because he could not kill a boy, and who, 3 years later, walked his lord through hell and brought him home. I think the second one is the better story. Thank you for watching. If this story drew you in, consider subscribing and leave a like to help more people discover these tales. Japan has 1,000 more legends waiting in the dark. I'll see you in the next one.